On this Saturday night, Alberta's escalating firefight. Residents on edge as extreme heat settles in.
It takes a lot of resources. It's hot, hard, dirty work.
The situation volatile, the losses stacking up as conditions deteriorate.
Sort of our party room. It was a family room.
Visit to the Vatican.
Great wonderful.
Pope Francis and President Zelenskyy's peace plan to help Ukraine's most vulnerable victims. Repairing a throwaway society.
I've gotten quotes for boards that are more than 3/4 the price of the product.
The unaffordable options and calls to fix a broken system.
Global National with Farah Nasser.
Good evening to you, and thank you for joining us. We're going to begin tonight with the erupting wildfire emergency in Alberta, where the crisis is expected to escalate this weekend as unseasonably hot and dry weather hits. The concern? The arrival of a heat dome that many fear will fuel the situation. Albertans, understandably, are on edge, as even more people in the province's fire zones are being told to prepare to leave at a moment's notice. Right now, there are around 80 active wildfires burning across northern and central Alberta. About a quarter are out of control. Environment Canada has blanketed all of Alberta and much of neighbouring BC under heat advisories. Temperatures are forecast to climb in the low 30s for the next several days. That's 10 to 15 degrees above the seasonal norm. And the smoke from those wildfires and in BC, Saskatchewan and Manitoba is now impacting air quality across much of Canada. The searing heat threat of lightning strikes and fierce winds will likely ignite and fan even more raging fires. Marney Blunt is near Entwistle, west of Edmonton, and she has our top story tonight. Marney.
Farah, there are about 80 wildfires in Alberta, many of them burning out of control. Here in Parkland County, residents have been able to return home, but the situation here remains delicate, and the community is still on edge. A haze of smoke clouding the air, smoldering ground with trees turned to use matchsticks, homes reduced to rubble and ash. Devastating scenes of a wildfire in Alberta's Parkland and Yellowhead counties.
Here was sort of my pride and joy. It's a 79 Cadillac with 76,000 K on it, right there.
Last Saturday, Archie and Donna Lee came home to a nightmare after they were forced to leave 2 days earlier.
Yeah, everything burnt.
A home full of memories, now gone.
And that was our a breezeway in the middle that was sort of our party room. It was a family room type of thing.
Nearby, fire crews are still working around the clock fighting hot spots.
And the wind shifted a bit and pushed that fire this way. The sad part is it jumped the river right all through here, and many homes on that side were lost.
And with high temperatures, wind, tinder dry conditions, and the fire deeply embedded into peat moss in the ground, they're bracing for the worst.
Well, our concerns with the fire today is low humidity, high temps, and that's a real good day for fire growth, and that's what our crews are being mindful of in there.
The chief says crews are exhausted and hoping for relief.
It takes a lot of resources. It's hot, hard, dirty work. It's a tough, grueling couple of days ahead of us. We really hope those incoming resources are distributed to the places that need it.
And while the evacuation orders have been lifted, the Parkland mayor is still warning residents to be ready to leave again on a moment's notice.
This fire is still active and it is still very concerning. We are encouraging residents to be prepared, to have a bag ready, enough food and water for 3 days, all of their medications and important documents.
As for Donna and Archie Lee, they plan on rebuilding. They're grateful for the support from their community and local church and are focusing on what matters most.
We've lost everything, but I'm glad I still have Archie, because I've had lots of bad things happen during my lifetime, and this is the most devastating, but we have each other, and that's all that really matters.
Officials in neighboring Yellowhead County say there are still 2 fires of concern near Wildwood and Evansburg. Fire officials also say while there are no active fires here, there is still concern as the peat moss is burning deeper into the ground, which heightens the risk of the trees reigniting and the fire spreading even further. Farah?
Marney Blunt near Entwistle, Alberta. Thanks for that, Marney. Stay safe out there. Neighboring BC is also bracing for extreme summer-like temperatures. It's only May, and already there are more than 40 active wildfires burning across that province. Parts of BC's and central and southern interior have been dealing with flooding sparked by record spring heat and a fast-melting snowpack. And there is potential for more high stream flows as temperatures rise. The good news is officials say this heat wave won't be as hot as the deadly heat dome that hit the province's lower mainland in June of 2021. It was a meeting that came at a critical time. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy met with Pope Francis today for their first face-to-face since Russia invaded Ukraine last year. As Touria Izri reports, the talks come during a pivotal moment in the conflict, but some political experts believe the meeting is long overdue.
Pope Francis welcomed Volodymyr Zelenskyy to the Vatican in what's being considered the Ukrainian president's most delicate stop on a packed trip. The two spoke privately for 40 minutes, with the Pope underscoring the need to protect the most innocent victims of the war.
This meeting should have happened earlier, but I think it's a big victory for the Ukrainian president.
Francis has tried to position himself as a possible peacemaker. Zelenskyy recently invited him to Kyiv, but the Pope said he would only go on the condition he also visits Moscow, an approach some political experts call counterproductive.
It is not really possible to broker a peace deal when Russia wants to conquer Ukraine.
The Italian government offered its full support, with Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni vowing to back Ukraine as long as necessary. We discussed our cooperation, particularly security and military cooperation, said Zelenskyy. His visit to Rome comes at a crucial time. Ukrainian forces are advancing towards the eastern city of Bakhmut ahead of a widely anticipated counteroffensive. This political scientist, originally from Ukraine, believes Zelenskyy's travels are in preparation.
This is just continuation of visits from Zelenskyy in order to get public support and weapons and ammunition for the new counteroffensive in this war with Russia.
The Ukrainian president's next stop is Germany, where the government revealed it will provide $3 billion in weapons and equipment to Ukraine, the largest aid package since the war began. And there will likely be more aid coming. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is preparing to travel to South Korea on Monday for the G7, where he and other world leaders are expected to discuss boosting support for Ukraine and ramping up pressure on Russia to end the war. Farah?
Touria Izri in Ottawa. Thank you for that, Touria. Palestinian militants in Israel have agreed to a ceasefire ending a fifth day of fighting. Tonight, people celebrated as news of that ceasefire spread. Just hours ago, plumes of smoke rose above Gaza City. Rocket launches from Gaza followed bombing by Israeli aircraft of Islamic Jihad targets. Egypt was able to mediate a truce, ending clashes that left 35 people dead. Israeli forces first launched an airstrike campaign in the early hours of Tuesday, accusing Islamic Jihad leadership of planning attacks on Israel. Recent headlines surrounding Canada and China are highlighting issues within our security culture. On this week's The West Block, host Mercedes Stevenson spoke to experts about the need to update Canada's national security strategy amid Chinese foreign interference blunders. Mercedes.
Farah, there's no question that Canada is operating in an increasingly dangerous world, and Canadians are targets for foreign espionage and intimidation. Just ask MP Michael Chong, who found out that he and his family were being targeted by the People's Republic of China. Well, spy versus spy isn't new. There has been a high level of concern over the targeting of a parliamentarian's family, and questions about why that information never made its way into the hands of the Prime Minister or his national security advisors, instead seemingly getting lost in a bureaucratic maze. Vincent Rigby, the former national security advisor to the Prime Minister, says the recent revelations highlight problems in Canada's national security culture and oversight, calling it a collective failure.
In terms of who's to blame with respect to Mr. Chong and what's happening here, I mean, I know that for politicians there's a natural inclination to try and hold one person or one institution accountable. And in my view, that when something like this happens, it's a collective failure.
Rigby says that while Canadian spies need updated information tools and oversight, the problems are starting with our politicians and their disinterest in national security.
I would say the problem starts at the political level, and I think that at the political level it's not taken as seriously as it probably should until there's a major crisis.
Former CSIS Director Ward Elcock found the Chong case less concerning, saying China commonly spies on critics of the regime, but echoed the concern about politicians' lack of understanding when it comes to national security issues.
Our politicians are really not very experienced in dealing with national security issues, and frankly would often prefer not to deal with them.
That lack of familiarity and maturity when it comes to intelligence is a problem across parties, according to both Rigby and Elcock. But Rigby contends politicians could do more to make sure sensitive information is being seen and properly considered.
Right now, I think part of the problem we're having with foreign interference is that you're getting all this intel, but it's going up the chain in a very disparate way.
We'll have more on what needs to change for Canada to be able to deal with spies and protect Canadians tomorrow on the West Block. Farah?
Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa. Thank you, Mercedes. Food inflation continues to outpace overall inflation in Canada, leading many to wonder why the price of supply-managed items like milk, butter, and eggs are so high. And Gaviola has more on whether this complex system is doing what it's supposed to.
And at the bakery, obviously, we use a ton of butter every day. So we use minimum 15 kilo butter per day.
Martine Bauer owns a French restaurant, bar and bakery. She tells Global News the price of eggs has increased more than 50% in 2 years. Butter's up more than 70%. Dairy, eggs and poultry are all supply managed in Canada. This system was born out of a difficult time for farmers in the 60s. Technological advances meant poultry, egg and dairy producers struggled with oversupply and low, unstable prices, leading to disputes between farmers and processors. Farmers banded together to ask provincial governments to create marketing boards, which led to the supply management system. Its aim, to ensure stable prices for farmers and consumers. To this day, provincial boards are responsible for setting prices under this federal program. Supply management also limits imports, which would compete with Canadian products. This complex system is polarizing. Some defend it by pointing to peer countries where inflation has been much higher.
Food inflation based on supply management is minimal, despite what people may think, and it works very, very effectively so as to prevent overproduction.
Canada is the only country where supply management remains. This food economist says there's a price to pay for this system.
For consumers, it likely costs them more money, but not as much more as some people would argue. The other thing it does, though, is provides much more predictability in prices.
Many experts say it's not perfect, but it helped Canada through the avian flu outbreak.
In Canada, we actually had to slaughter about, I think, a little less than 2 million birds, whereas in the U.S. they had to slaughter over 60 million birds, and egg prices went up 60%. In Canada, egg prices went up, I think, about 17% as a result.
Supply management may be mitigating food inflation, but costs are still rising, and someone has to eat that cost. But Martine's conscience won't let her use anything else.
If I substitute, it will be maybe less expensive for us, but the quality will not be the same. And this is all our point, to be doing good food, good taste with good product.
Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Ontario Provincial Police Sergeant Eric Mueller made his final trip home today. The procession made its way from Ottawa to Rockland along Highway 17. Mueller died of his injuries after he was shot early Thursday in an ambush in Bourget. The 42-year-old was responding to a call about a family disturbance with 2 other officers who were injured but survived. A police funeral for Mueller will be held on Thursday at the Canadian Tire Centre. 39-year-old Alain Bellefeuille has been charged with first-degree murder and 2 charges of attempted murder. Horror tornadoes wreak havoc in the U.S. coming up, the death and destruction after more than 24 twisters touch down. Parts of the U.S. are in recovery mode after a potential 30 tornadoes moved across several states, leaving at least one person dead in Texas. In Oklahoma, heavy rain, strong wind gusts and hail were also reported. Buildings were damaged and power lines brought down. Nebraska saw grapefruit-sized hail. The damage is consistent with tornadoes, but forecasters are expected to confirm the exact number today. Archaeologists have discovered a 4,000-year-old temple in western Peru. The site is about 75 kilometers north of Lima. It's believed people carried out religious cult ceremonies in the U-shaped temple. Archaeologists also found a carving of an ancient cross symbol, which is now the oldest complete representation found in the Andes. Ahead, the fight to fix why it's so difficult to repair our aging electronics. With inflation driving up the cost of everything, it's more important than ever to have things that last. But whether it's phones or kitchen appliances, you've likely had a hard time getting products repaired. On this week's The New Reality, Krista Hesse looks at what some see as a broken system for maintaining what we own and the growing movement to fix it.
Fixing the circuit boards that power electronic devices is delicate work. Replacing tiny control chips, some smaller than a fingernail, can be all that's needed. But as John Fidel knows all too well, repair these days is never that simple.
I have far more difficulty repairing a modern piece of equipment just for the fact of parts availability. I can't get the parts in my hand.
Instead, manufacturers will offer him an entirely new circuit board, but at a price.
I've gotten quotes for boards that are more than 3/4 the price of the product.
Fidel says he'll spend hours searching for a more affordable option, making it more likely the customer will choose to repair.
Manufacturers used to sell parts. Over the last 20-30 years, they've systematically stopped doing that.
And that led Kyle Wiens to start iFixit, a website that offers repair guides, tools, and parts.
We're hoping that we can end this throwaway society by making all the things that we have last longer.
A recent survey found just 18% of Canadians had their last broken electronic device or home appliance repaired. The biggest barriers, cost and the inability to fix their products.
More and more these days, we get products from manufacturers and they don't have a plan for us to be able to maintain it.
The Right to Repair movement wants to change that.
Right to Repair is the idea that if you bought it, you should be able to fix it.
They're pushing to pass laws that would force manufacturers to provide information and parts to everyone. A game changer for independent shops like Fidel's. Advocates say, in order to fix all our devices, we first need to repair the system. Krista Hesse, Global News.
Now, Toronto hockey fans are definitely feeling sour today. The Maple Leafs had finally made it to the second round of the NHL playoffs, breaking a nearly 20-year curse. But, of course, despite that, they still lost the series to the Florida Panthers, getting knocked out of the running for the Stanley Cup yet again. And with one Canadian team left, it's renewing questions on whether or not we'll see a cup on this side of the border anytime soon. Here's Easton Ham.
A sea of blue jerseys and blue emotions coming out of Maple Leaf Square Friday night after a heartbreaking loss for Toronto fans.
It sucks, man. Like, they make us go through this every year. Like, yeah, we made it through the first round, but I honestly thought that we got this series in like 6 games.
Despite so much hope and a star-studded lineup, it's still familiar territory for the blue and white.
You have this hope that everything's going to work out, and every single year it never, ever, 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 ever does.
A fight to the very end, according to the Leafs' star players.
I don't think that belief ever wavered. I'm not even saying it, but I want to see, them get the job done. I'm not pressed, but we got a lot of belief in this group. We got a lot of belief in that core, and, it sucks right now, but we got belief.
1967, the year the Leafs last won the Stanley Cup. Despite this number, like always, fans remain hopeful.
We took a step in the right direction, and now it's just about taking what you learned this year in how to win a playoff series and putting it all together again next year.
But as one Canadian team falls, there is still hope for another to win the Stanley Cup. The Edmonton Oilers now holding the weight of the country on its shoulders. Now trailing the Las Vegas Golden Knights 3-2. But Oil Country not worried about a spill.
If comebacks never happen, history wouldn't be made. Oil in 7, let's go!
Definitely, Oil, like we're winning, let's go.
For many Canadians, seeing the Oilers raise Lord Stanley wouldn't be something to celebrate, but it's been 3 decades since the Stanley Cup has been hoisted north of the border. So, the question remains, is this the year the Cup comes home? Easton Ham, Global News.
Fingers crossed. That's Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Farah Nasser. On behalf of our whole crew here, I want to thank you for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is Pouch Cove in Newfoundland and Labrador. Tomorrow, Jeff Semple will be at the anchor desk, wishing all the mothers out there a very happy Mother's Day tomorrow. Have a good night.